just before the National Day in Hungary, where all major political forces in the country decide to make their voices heard, I am joined by Katalin Cseh from the Momentum Party to discuss the current political situation in Hungary. Hello.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So, you are a member of parliament, but before you used to be a member of the European Parliament, so maybe let's start with the European relations between Hungary and the European Union. So, according to the polls, 80% or more Hungarians want to stay in the EU. However, the perception of the country within the European institutions is indicating towards a different sentiment.
Well, Hungary is a country that has been fighting for long decades to belong to the transatlantic community, to a community based on human rights, free markets. My grandparents, this entire generation sacrificed their life for this struggle. So therefore, I believe that Hungarians, in the bottom of the heart, they are very pro-European people. We understand what we gained from being a member of this alliance. And this is why it is so extremely horrifying to see that our current government is trying to move us farther away from this direction. And particularly given the current context when there is an illegal and brutal war raging in our exact neighborhood, that we would need to stand together as Europeans to protect ourselves, to protect Ukraine, and fight for a future where we can all live in security and peace. And our government is doing exactly the opposite of what the Hungarian interest would be in the situation by moving closer and closer to Russia and sabotaging the European joint effects. So this is why I'm really hopeful that this pro-European voice of Hungarians will be also heard in the next elections.
Shouldn't Hungarians be more wary of Russian influence, given its history? It used to be a communist country.
No, absolutely, and this is why I thought at the first moment I heard the terrible news of the illegal Russian invasion of Ukraine that this is something that should unite all of us Hungarians to stand behind Ukraine, to stand up against the aggressor and support the victims, like we wanted to be supported in 1956 when we took on the streets against Russian tanks. And this is why it is so shocking, both from a security but also from a moral perspective, hearing the government taking the side of Vladimir Putin, the side of those who are throwing shells on hospitals, bombing kindergartens. And I think that the shift of mood in Hungary after the outbreak of the war has a lot to do with the terrible effect of Russian propaganda in our country. If you turn on the national news in Hungary that is subsidized by taxpayers' money, it's like you would be listening to Sputnik or Russia Today. Millions of people get this false information thanks to the government and thanks to their cooperation with Putin's Russia, contrary to the European and Hungarian security interests.
So you say that Viktor Orban is using the media, the national media, to solidify this would you say anti-Ukrainian stance?
Absolutely. Anti-Ukrainian, pro-Russian. I was absolutely shocked to hear those sound bites that I really thought it's only present in the most pro-Russian outlets, in the Russian outlets, about how Ukraine is responsible of having been attacked, that Mr. Zelensky is a Nazi on drugs, that...
that was actually...
That was actually said on Hungarian media. Just a couple of weeks ago, a Hungarian pro-government journalist said that Bucha was a false flag operation, that people didn't die there. I was in Bucha. I saw the garden of that church where the people were buried. And it is absolutely disgusting how they are distorting reality in order to stand on the side of the aggressor and try to mobilize the population with lies. To follow them in this pursuit. But really, I am convinced still that those Hungarians who know the truth, who hear people speaking up, they know that it is really a black and white situation. There is an aggressor and there is a victim. And there is a European interest and there is Russian interest. And we Hungarians have to take the side of Europe. We have to work with our allies. We have to defend our borders. We have to defend Ukraine. We have to help them with weapons, to have a strong voice in these current negotiations that are going on, because this is our interest too, because we can be next. And I don't think the government realizes that. There is no deal with Putin that would make Hungarians safe if Ukraine falls.
Viktor Orban's grip on the country seems to be loosening a bit now, given the polls. Would you say that this is because of this pro-Russian rhetoric, or maybe there is something else at play here?
Mr. Orban has been trying to play European strongman, blocking European action, stirring up all these extremist, right-wing voices all across Europe, all across the world. He tries to be somehow like a symbol for them. It is like a very egoistical pursuit. And what has happened in the meantime that he forgot how to govern. Our healthcare is crumbling, our education system is in shambles. Life has never been so expensive in Hungary as it's now. There were time periods with 40% of food inflation, and people just had enough. And I think that the current changes, the loss of support in Fidesz's poll numbers, and the surge of a new political movement contributes to this, that people just realize that they cannot govern.
So on the side of the government, do you see any moves now to consolidate power or to make it more difficult for the future government if it changes to govern?
Well, unfortunately, Hungary has been in a state of state capture for over a decade. So even in this very moment, it will be very difficult to shift back to a democratic system governed by the rule of law.
Why so?
Because in the past years, they basically grinded up every sort of checks and balances that could control the government. Everything, every authority, the media authority, the judicial bodies are in the hand of cronies. The universities, many of them were privatized and handed to foundations that are controlled by people close to the government. They have a very tight grip on power, and for instance, in the case of the public prosecutor, it is necessary to have a very high majority in parliament in order to have him removed. So that would mean that unless there is a sweeping supermajority coming after them, the public prosecutor's office will still be occupied by the former college classmate of Viktor Orban. But what I'm seeing now that they are even moving further. So we heard statements from Mr. Orban that he is willing to hand power over to the man of Brussels, so to say, as he's referring to Mr. Magyar. And for instance, in the upcoming modification of the constitution, they could cement their control by decree for an unlimited time, even without having a supermajority. So it's a tough fight.
Mm-hmm. Those changes in constitutions, what would they entail?
Well, they will propose a number of different types of changes. They are proposing, for instance, a modification that would enable them to strip dual Hungarian nationals who are dual nationals from countries outside the EU from their Hungarian nationality if they, quote-unquote, go against the sovereignty of the country, which in their case is a catchphrase for all opposition activities. So to say, there are also decrees about modifications of certain laws regarding freedom of speech and freedom of assembly, particularly in connection, but not only, with the Budapest Pride March. There are also very symbolic modifications that pursue their political agenda in the shape of a constitutional change, which I personally find absurd. But overall, it is really visible that they are turning themselves into campaign mode. They will work on divisive issues, try to take the focus away from the really important things, the state of healthcare, the state of the economy, the state of the school, and the security interests of Hungarians. because they will never win this fight.
So just to wrap it up quickly, how do you see the future of Hungary now? Do you think that this movement that we are seeing at the moment, with TISA obviously being a certain competitor to your movement, will it be enough to change the power in Hungary?
Well, Hungary is at a crossroads, as Europe is in the crossroads also. For us, it's vital, it's fundamental that if there are any sort of changes happening in Europe that would entail a stronger military cooperation, a stronger economic cooperation, a more effective Europe, that we would be a part of that. And this can only happen if the tide changes next year. I am also hopeful that it's not going to be a parliament with two right-wing parties, because let's face it, TISA is also a right-wing party. Okay, they are centrists, but I also hope that the voice of left-leaning people and liberals will also be represented. But we need a change. Under Orban, we are not safe. There is a war raging in our neighborhood, and he is on the side of the aggressor. He is sacrificing the security interests of Hungarians for his own financial interests.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My guest was Katalin Cseh, an MP from the opposition Momentum Party. I'm Paweł Trzaskowski, TVP World from Budapest, Hungary.